And so I'll just kind of start with a timeline that kind of walk you through what happened on August 22nd at about 9:53 in the morning. We received a call, our agency received a call to the 2200 block of Southwest 78, and it was for eviction help. Oklahoma City police officers do not serve civil papers, do not get involved in evictions, so our officers explained that very thoroughly to the reporting party and what the next steps needed to be, and kind of advised her on how to walk through that process. Once they did that, then that's when the incident was turned over to the sheriff's office, and then they ended up making a response out there. And in that initial call, the mother had called in, said her son was acting up, placing things in the driveway. She'd been working on eviction and VPO paperwork prior to this. She was advised to get the eviction paperwork together, and advised to contact the sheriff's office since the property resided in Oklahoma County. We were not able to verify a VPO at that time. The officers, the information that they got was that the VPO at that point had not, something wasn't right with it, and it wasn't showing up as valid. We don't know. We'll look into that and see why that determination was made, or if that's actually the facts, but that's the facts the officers had at the time. At about 1:18 p.m., neighbors started calling 911 on shots fired at that location. One of our officers happened to be with a county sheriff employee who had his radio on and was hearing the radio traffic, and relayed that to our officers that this was actually a shooting involving Oklahoma County Sheriff's deputies. We started to the scene, and our first officer arrived on scene at about 1:22 p.m. Started rendering aid. He got to the backyard, found the two deputies that had been shot, and started rendering aid to them and calling for medical help and getting all of that started. The suspect was not there at the time. The officers cleared the house and began looking in the area, and they got information that he had left, and they had a description of his vehicle. So our helicopter went airborne at about 1:24 p.m. Again, medical efforts continue on the two deputies, and one of the supervisors on the scene requested our helicopter to land to try and get one of the deputies to the hospital as quickly as they could. But when our aircraft landed, they realized that there was a lot more to that, and our aircraft was not equipped to make that transport, and so we couldn't do it. We couldn't make it work. They were just trying to do what they can to speed that up and get them to the hospital as quickly as they could. At about 1:33 p.m., one of our officers spotted the suspect vehicle near Southwest 89th and Walker, radioed that information, and began waiting on officers to get there, but the suspect took off, started a pursuit. At about 1:36 p.m., the suspect entered northbound I-35 from Southeast 89th Street. Again, at that point, several more officers started arriving on scene. One of our officers tried to disable the vehicle, tried to ram it, but as you saw yesterday, he was pulling a boat, which made it very difficult, if not almost impossible, to do that. But they were trying to do everything they could to stop him because of the danger that he posed to the public at that point, because he'd obviously already shot two law enforcement officers, so we knew at that point that no one was going to be safe from him, and that he was going to be very desperate and would probably continue those actions. At about 1:39 p.m., the suspect fired rounds at the pursuing officers. This was at I-35 and approximately Southeast 44th Street. Just a few seconds later, still at 1:39, but probably about 50 or so seconds later, the suspect fired again just north of Grand Boulevard. One of our officers was stationary just after that in the 2500 block of southbound I-35 on the inside shoulder, and he fired at the suspect who was northbound, attempting to stop the pursuit and stop the deadly threat, since he had already shot at the officers. And at the same time, another officer was able to get close enough to the vehicle and also try to stop the suspect and fired rounds at him as well. So we had two officers that returned fire at the suspect. And this occurred, the second officer firing occurred somewhere around Southeast 15th Street, we think, in that area. The pursuit then continued east on I-40 at high speeds. The suspect exited at Air Depot and drove to the Tinker Air Force Base gate, where, as you saw in the video, he was holding the rifle out of the window, and he basically gave up at the gate, but he was not cooperating and had to be tackled to the ground and taken into custody. The suspect was also tased at that point to gain cooperation and placed in handcuffs. He did sustain an injury and was taken to a local hospital and treated for that injury, and was released at the hospital and booked into the county jail. So again, that's just a basic overview there of what occurred, and I was very encouraged to hear the sheriff say too that his deputy is out of surgery, and so we pray for a speedy recovery for him, and we also pray for the family of the fallen deputy and again the agency as a whole. We looked and we had 5 prior calls to this address on 78 within the last year. All of those were like disturbance type calls that were dispositioned as civil matters, and ultimately led to probably what occurred yesterday with the eviction and trying to get that taken care of. So with that, we are working on getting information as to where and when the firearms were purchased. We don't have that yet. That takes a little legwork, and we have to work with some of our federal partners to get that information. So we are working on that. I know that's always a question that comes up, and we're going to work to find that out. Obviously, it is important to this case. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have of me regarding the investigation.
Chief, I have a question about the guns.
Yeah.
I know you all are looking into that. According to the VPO that was filed on August 11th, and it said that it was served to him on the 12th. It said that all of his weapons were to be taken by Oklahoma City Police. Did that happen, and how was he able to get a hold of weapons if that did happen?
I don't know yet, and it's still early in the investigation. Again, the information that we had when we went out there showed that the VPO hadn't been served. We don't serve VPOs, so I'm not sure how that information was relayed and what happened in that incident. But that'll be something that we'll look at as part of the investigation for sure.
Chief, why do we think the suspect went to Tinker? Did he just make a wrong turn, or?
Really have no idea. I couldn't tell you. I mean, it's obvious, he's a very desperate individual, and I have no idea why he would do that. I mean, I asked that question too of myself. I couldn't figure that out.
More so a question for Sheriff Johnson. What protective vests were the deputies wearing yesterday, and did the bullet penetrate those vests?
Just your standard everyday issued ballistic vest. Obviously a model like what I'm wearing here, but when you're talking about 223, 5.56 rounds, it just turns into shrapnel and still has enough power to even go through these. So they were both wearing vests, just to answer that question, but yes, it was still able to penetrate.
Do you think with what happened yesterday that you all will maybe upgrade those protective vests?
Well, I mean, if you ever get familiar with vests and you look at what our military uses, they use a rifle-rated vest. Those are very heavy for everyday use, and extremely expensive. These models right here run about $1,000 a unit. Those models run about $3,000 a unit. And like I said, they're extremely heavy, and I don't think that our deputies would be able to be as mobile with them, and it wouldn't be as user-friendly as these are.
And these units are brand new. We just got these on
Maybe 7-8 months. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Sheriff, can you talk about what it was like coming into work today?
It's extremely difficult. I got really emotional yesterday, and I apologize for that. I really tried to keep it together, especially for my community, and I know they look at the leader to be strong. But when you walk into a hospital, and one, I will tell you this, every one of my staff were involved in that pursuit to, just try to get justice for our guys. Every last one of us. And from everywhere across this agency, we just want a vindication. But when you walk into the hospital and you see one deputy being worked on, and clearly he's in bad shape. And so their room's blocked off, so you go into your other deputy's room to check on him and see how he's doing. And he says, "Sheriff, you're here." It was beyond the weirdest feeling moment I've ever had in my life. He grabs my hand and he tells me, "Sir, I couldn't save him. I'm sorry." He has taken ownership of this. And so when you see that, when you see the men and women you serve, that I so thankfully serve, and I'm grateful, when you see them break down like that, and it hurts like that, and I love all my folks, I do. It's a very difficult thing that I don't think you can put in words, and so it's tough, and today is tough. You try to get back to square one where you can start making decisions, because we still have to run an agency, we still have to plan for a funeral, we still have a deputy in the hospital worried about his well-being, and so there's just a lot there. But I will tell you, when you can lean on men like Wade Gorley, like J.D. Younger, like Todd Gibson, like everybody that reached out to me, Nathaniel Tarver, Rick Jackson, they all reached out. I mean, there's so many agencies I can't even name them all, but when they all reach out and say, "Hey, we're here for you," and they start saying, "Hey, you need to think about this, or you need to think about that," that really is what makes it doable, because you have other guys that understand where you're at and are willing to carry that load for you.
Obviously, the trauma that this is for this agency, what type of support have you guys received, mainly from the wellness unit from the Oklahoma City
Oh
Police
my
Department?
goodness. When you talk about the wellness unit from Oklahoma City Police Department, I don't think you can find the words that have enough weight behind them. They come in, clearly everybody's rattled, and they come in, they level everybody out, they start working, they start doing things, they start putting things into motion that we're not even thinking about, and just working alongside the administration and with the deputies involved. They really made this process much, I don't want to say easier, because that's not the word, but much more doable, because we were in a very sad way. So we were very grateful for Oklahoma City and the wellness department for coming out, and they're in constant contact. They're helping us with the funeral. They're helping us with our deputy who's still in the hospital, and then with just the well-being of all of our deputies that were involved or close to. So I think this partnership has been very beneficial in many areas. That's a great question.
What was the suspect saying when deputies arrived at the home? He was refusing to come out.
Ma'am, I don't know.
How was the third deputy? Wasn't there a third deputy?
There was a
there?
third deputy.
How were they?
She is shaken up, as you can imagine. Taking her time off. And since it's involved in the investigation, I really can't speak too much into that. But she's okay.
And so you guys have mentioned, not only yesterday, but just now, that this other deputy, John's trying to save Bobby. And so how exactly did he try and save him?
When you get into what we call the fatal funnel in law enforcement, which is the doorway, and Deputy Swartz got hit and went down, he tried to get on top of him and pull him out of the way. What a courageous act. Like I said, to give your own life for your friends, so courageous. Jump down to get and pull him out the way, and then that time he got hit himself. And so
So the
truly a
suspect
hero.
and the